people have an understanding of the money going in and out, and they've looked for those patterns, I think we all agree that kind of the next step that makes the most sense is to create a budget and think about like a spending plan and even a savings plan. Like, how much money do you have coming in, going out? Where's that money going? How much are you spending? And then how much are you saving? So what do you guys think is like, what's the best way for someone who's never created a budget to go about that? Are there like some quick steps that we can share that help them get started?
So I was thinking what you were just saying, Jen, about timing of our spending too, and then creating a budget. I think no matter how you want to create a budget, there's lots of ways to do it. Paying attention to that timing is a piece we want to hold on to as well, because I know a lot of people spend a lot of money right when they get paid, right? So this big chunk of money comes into your bank account. You know what payday is for many people that have a salary job. And then then and there, you feel like you have money, and a lot of people spend, right? So I think that timing is a big piece of budgeting as well. And kind of once you start to track your expenses, whether it's on a Google Sheet, for example, or it's in an app is another way you can track your expenses, or it's on paper and pencil. I have a money journal. I actually don't have it here with me right now, but I have a money journal that I like to capture a lot of my money and thinking about money offline as well. So there's a lot of ways you can do it, and really you need to find the one that's right for you, right? But to create a budget, you need to know what's coming in and what's going out. And so if it's each transaction by transaction you're recording to really get that grasp, and then thinking about what categories, right, your spending's going into. How much are we spending in utilities? How much am I spending in fun? How much am I saving, right? And so that's just kind of my advice, is to try out some different budgeting techniques. Give them a little chance though, and then see what might work for you.
I find that too. That's great advice. And I want to mention, as adults, we fear failure. It always feels like we need to have the perfect solution to anything that's happening in our life. And with finances, it's guaranteed that you will make mistakes, that you will fail from time to time. And that's okay as long as you're taking steps and you're headed in the right direction. And there is no perfect way to create a budget, because everyone is different. We all have different lives. Some of us are busier than others. And sometimes the easiest way to get started, I know that when I really decided to get serious about my money, I started with pen and paper. I just put it down in a notebook. It took a little bit of time to do that detective work to figure out what subscriptions do I have, and those weirdo bills that aren't on a regular monthly schedule. They are, quarterly or once a year. So I just had a notebook and I just started with that. And for my brain, that connection between my brain and tactically writing something down worked very well. And then I shifted to a spreadsheet. And then I've played around a little bit with things like some of the personal finance apps, but there is no right or wrong way to do it. The key is really just to try it out, and get into a consistent habit of looking at that budget or spending plan.
I think so much of what both of you said is really important. And one thing I want to highlight is that when you're starting something new, like tracking your spending and creating a budget, don't overcomplicate it by using an app that you've never used before. Like, if at some point you had an app that you used for budgeting or spending or whatever, and you're like, you know what, I haven't been doing this forever, let me open this back up and get started. I think that an app is a great tool for a beginner if you already have some experience with it, but don't try to take on too much at once. So there are some awesome apps and sites and everything that are great, but at the beginning, there is no shame in paper and pencil or a basic spreadsheet that just has columns and rows. Like, it doesn't have to be fancy. That is a really good way to get started because you're not trying to learn something new while you're starting this new habit. You're just keeping it really basic. Then once you have a handle on it, that's when you can do kind of what Marilee said was like experiment with some different options and see if there's something that works better for you. And Sybil referenced like an app that she uses. There are a ton of really cool tools that can do a lot more for you once you have the basics down. So keep those in the back of your mind for like kind of like our next episode when we're going to talk about the kind of the next level of financial literacy. But at the beginning, don't feel like, oh, if I'm not using some fancy tool that I'm not doing it right. Like there is literally no way to do it wrong as long as you're keeping track of your income and the money going out. That's really the key here. So don't overcomplicate it, I think, because it goes back to that failure piece, right? If you're like, well, I forgot to put it in the app for 3 days. Well, now it's wrecked, and then you have that tendency to like wipe it all away. It's like when you eat ice cream on the second day of like your healthy eating plan. It's not ruined. You're just going to keep moving.
I was thinking the exact same thing. So what if somebody wanted to just start writing these things down? What might they want to include? I think they would want to include dates, right? So a date column of what day the income's coming in or what day the expense is going out. And then maybe start helping themselves, besides writing just the expense and the amount or the income and the amount, also starting to think about that category piece. And the reason I would start thinking about the category piece from the beginning is because that's the piece that's going to help you later as you have this habit of budgeting and of tracking your expenses. The category piece is going to help you later make some decisions about, I spend a lot in this area. Is there a way to spend less? Or, oh, wow, I really am ready to up my savings a little bit more. Where am I going to take that money from? Or do I need to make a little bit more money, right? So I would really consider trying to categorize your income and expenses from the beginning as well, to set yourself up to see those categories. Because it's hard to be like every $5 purchase. It's hard for us to conceptualize how much we're really spending in a certain category, like a fun category or eating out category, right? But once we start putting next to that dining out restaurants and we start to see restaurants come up over and over, we could quickly calculate restaurants and be like, I'm spending how much a month on restaurants, right? And eating out. So that's one piece of advice. I love the idea of doing it pencil paper first, if that's best for you, but I would go ahead and do that step of categorizing as well.
All right. So now we talked about kind of what we think is the first, you have that mindset shift. Now we're like, okay, you got to start writing down your spending, writing down how much you have coming in, thinking about your budget and how much money you're putting towards savings. And then you also want to think about your debt, how much money you're paying towards your debt, how much you owe. And we did a whole series on debt. So please go back and listen to those episodes. If you are not sure where to get started, we talk about how to create a payoff plan and how to kind of set all of that up. But your debts and your payments towards those debts are also a really big piece of that kind of mindset shift and then getting everything organized into a budget or a spending plan. And we also really encourage everybody to have an emergency fund, or you can call it a contingency fund or a backup fund or whatever you want to call it, but just a pot of money that you have in case an unexpected expense comes up, whether that's medical, your refrigerator goes out, whatever it is, you have this pool of money set aside so that you don't have to access more debt to pay for things. Or the other reason I think it's really important is like that mental health stress piece, because I used to really stress and feel overwhelmed all the time. Like, what if my car broke down? What if my furnace went out? I had an old furnace in the townhouse I owned, and I just kept waiting for my furnace to break. And I was like, how am I going to pay for that? So if I would have had this fund set aside, I could have accessed that money. So we recommend just getting started. And we've talked about this in other episodes as well. So if you want to like listen for that, even if you're putting $5 a month towards that fund, just start that process. As a beginner, We're not saying you better get that 6 months set up immediately, but just thinking about setting that up and putting that money aside. Those are kind of those big budgeting pieces that we want you to think about.